This is Will and Larry before Israel. We're going to take a little break from the Sabbath series and present a special three-part series about the Day of Simon to you all, since the holy day is right around the corner. Before we begin, we want everyone to know that to get a better understanding of this lesson, you should view some of our other videos that deal with the scriptures that are discussed in this lesson. The videos are the following. The Feast of Dedication originated in the Old Testament. Ruth and Gideon lived at the same time. And the 6-part series that is titled, There Were Prophets from Malachi to John the Baptist. Let's begin this lesson in 1 Maccabees chapter 13. We will explain what is going on during this time period between the Persians and Medes captivity and Roman captivity as we teach the lesson. Please read the first verse of the lesson.
1 Maccabees chapter 13, verse 41. Thus the yoke of the heathen was taken away from Israel in the 170th year.
This yoke is referring to Israelites being ruled by another nation. Verse 39 gives more clarity. Please read it.
Verse 39. As for any oversight or fault committed unto this day, we will forgive it, and the crown tax also, which you owe us. And if there were any other tribute paid in Jerusalem, it shall no more be paid.
People that are in captivity pay taxes. This occurred to Israelites because they broke the commandments. Let's get a precept to prove it. Please read Baruch chapter 3, verse 8.
Baruch chapter 3, verse 8. Behold, we are yet this day in our captivity, where thou hast scattered us, for a reproach and a curse, and to be subject to payments according to all the iniquities of our fathers which departed from the Lord our God.
Payments is a captivity, and part of the payments is paying taxes while in captivity. Let's continue reading 1 Maccabees chapter 13.
1 Maccabees chapter 13, verse 42. Then the people of Israel began to write in their instruments and contracts in the first year of Simon, the high priest, the governor and leaders of the Jews.
We're going to find out why the people of Israel wrote to Simon. Please continue reading.
Verse 43. In those days, Simon camped against the Gaza and besieged it round about. He made also an engine of war and set it by the city and battered a certain tower and took it. Verse 44. And they that were in the engine leaped into the city, whereupon there was a great uproar in the city. Verse 45. And so much as the people of the city rent their clothes and climbed upon the walls with their wives and children and cried with a loud voice, beseeching Simon to grant them to peace. Verse 46. And they said, Deal not with us according to our wickedness, but according to thy mercy.
Now we know that the people of Israel wrote to Simon for him to not deal with them according to their wickedness. Please read the next verse so we can find out what their wickedness was at that time.
1 Maccabees chapter 13, verse 47. So Simon was appeased toward them and fought no more against them, but put them out of the city and cleansed the houses wherein the idols were, and so entered into with songs and thanksgiving.
Verse 47 proves that their wickedness was idol worshiping. Leviticus chapter 18, verses 25 through 30 tells why Simon put the sinners out of the land. This is similar to what was done in 1 Maccabees chapter 4, verses 36 through 41. Let's read verse 41 of 1 Maccabees chapter 4.
1 Maccabees chapter 4, verse 41. Then Judas appointed certain men to fight against those that were in the fortress until he had cleansed the sanctuary.
This verse is similar to 1 Maccabees chapter 13, verse 47, because both verses are talking about a feast of dedication. The songs and thanksgiving is referring to keeping the commandments. We will give more information about it when we get to verse 51. Let's read the next verse in 1 Maccabees chapter 13.
1 Maccabees chapter 13, verse 48. Yea, he put all uncleanness out of it, and placed such men there as would keep the law, and made it stronger than it was before, and built therein a dwelling place for himself.
This verse is basically saying the same thing that the previous verse is saying. The uncleanness in verse 48 is the idols and sinners from verse 47. Let's examine verse 49.
First Maccabees, chapter 13, verse 49. They also of the tower.
They is referring to the people that were put out along with the people of the city in verse 47. The sinners of the tower and the city were put out. Let's read about how Simon's brother Jonathan did the same thing.
First Maccabees chapter 12, verse 35. After this came Jonathan home again, and calling the elders of the people together, he consulted with them about building strongholds in Judea. Verse 36. And making the walls of Jerusalem higher, and raising a great mount between the tower and the city, for to separate it from the city, so it might be alone, that men might neither sell nor buy in it. 37. Upon this, they came together to build up the city, for as much as part of the wall toward the brook on the east side was fallen down, and they repaired that which was called Caphanatha. Simon also set up Adida and Cephala, and made it strong with gates and bars.
Let's pick up where we left off in 1 Maccabees chapter 13, verse 49. After, they also of the tower in Jerusalem
Were kept so straight.
The straight is referring to the commandment about not interacting with the people that were put out of the city to be purified. Let's get a precept about straight.
2 Esdras chapter 7, verse 21. For God hath given straight commandment to such as came, what they should do to live, even as they came, and what they should observe to avoid punishment.
Now let's read about an example of someone else that experienced these straight things.
The book of Numbers chapter 12, verse 14. And the Lord said unto Moses, If her father had but spit in her face, should she not be ashamed 7 days? Let her be shut out from the camp 7 days, and after that let her be received in again.
More information about these straight things is covered in Leviticus. We explained it in our 6-part video series that is titled, There Were Prophets from Malachi to John the Baptist. Please watch that series to get more understanding about straight things. Let's get back to the breakdown of 1 Maccabees chapter 13. Let's pick back up in verse 49. Please read all of verse 49.
1 Maccabees chapter 13, verse 49. They also of the tower in Jerusalem were kept so straight that they could neither come forth nor go into the country, nor buy nor sell. Wherefore they were great in distress for want of victuals, and a great number of them perished through famine.
The straight things include not being able to buy, sell, and enter into the country. Some of the people perished from the famine. The famine is both literal and spiritual. The people didn't have the victuals, which is the famine, because they didn't keep the commandments. Amos chapter 8, verse 11 proves that the famine is talking about not receiving the word of God. Please check out our video that is titled, Ruth and Gideon Lived at the Same Time, to get a better understanding on the famine. Let's move on. Please read 1 Maccabees chapter 13, verse 50.
1 Maccabees chapter 13, verse 50. Then cried they to Simon, beseeching him to be at one with them, which thing he granted them. And when he had put them out from thence, he cleansed the tower from pollutions.
The request that the people made to Simon to be at one with them is the same thing as the request they made to be at peace with him in verse 45. Verses 45 and 50 are talking about the same request. The people were allowed to enter the tower again after they were purified of their uncleanness. Let's read about this law in the Old Testament.
Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 9 through 11. Verse 9. When the host goeth forth against thine enemies, then keep thee from every wicked thing. Verse 10. If there be among you any man that is not clean by reason of uncleanness, that chanceth him by night, then shall he go abroad out of the camp, he shall not come within the camp. Verse 11. It shall be, when evening cometh, he shall wash himself with water, and when the sun is down, he shall come into the camp again.
Verses 12 and 13 mention the same thing spiritually. If anyone has questions about it, we'll explain it in a video. Let's continue to break down.
First Maccabees chapter 13, verse 51. And entered into the 23rd day of the second month in the 170th and first year, with thanksgiving and branch of palm trees, and with harps and cymbals, and with viols and hymns and songs, because there was destroyed a great enemy out of Israel.
The day was kept according to the commandments. First Maccabees chapter 4, verses 52 through 58 talk about another feast of dedication being kept the same way. Let's get two precepts for Thanksgiving, meaning keeping the laws of God.
First Maccabees chapter 4, verse 24. After this, they went home and sung a song of thanksgiving and praised the Lord in heaven, because it is good, because his mercy endureth forever. Now verse 33. Cast them down with the sword of them that love thee, and let all those that know thy name praise thee with thanksgiving.
The enemy in First Maccabees chapter 13, verse 51 is referring to everything that oppose the Lord. James chapter 4, verse 4 gives the enemy definition. The enemies at this time were the sinners in the land of Gaza, Tryphon with his host, and Demetrius with his host. Please read all of First Maccabees chapter 13 for a better understanding when you have time. Let's sum up First Maccabees chapter 13, verse 51 with another verse from the chapter that we read earlier.
First Maccabees chapter 13, verse 41. Thus the yoke of the heathen was taken away from Israel in the 170th year.
Let's move on to First Maccabees chapter 13, verse 52.
First Maccabees chapter 13, verse 52. He ordained also that the day should be kept every year with gladness. Moreover, the hill of the temple that was by the tower he made stronger than it was, and there he dwelt himself with his company.
We're going to deal with the breakdown of what the word day means after we finish this chapter. The Feast of Dedication does deal with the dedication of temples and altars. These are symbolic representatives of the people of Israel as a nation. The birth dates of things that are dedicated will be discussed after this chapter. There are good birth dates and bad birth dates. Our 4 parts video series that is titled Misunderstandings of Scriptures That Seem to Disrespect Women gives more clarity on this subject. If you haven't viewed it yet, please watch before we upload the next part of this lesson. First Maccabees chapter 13, verse 52 is basically saying the same thing as verse 48. Verse 53 says the same thing too. Please read it.
First Maccabees chapter 13, verse 53. And when Simon saw that John his son was a valiant man, he made him captain of all the host, and he dwelt in Gaza.
Gaza is the Gaza that Simon purified. Simon's son John was made captain of all of the hosts, which is the army of the nation of Israel at that time. Please read one precept to bring clarity on this point.
1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 45. Then said David to the Philistine, Thou comest to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a shield. But I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied.
This is the end of part 1 of our video series about explaining the day of Simon. If you like this content, please subscribe. If you haven't already, and comment, share, and like.
Sirach chapter 33, verse 17. Consider that I labor not for myself only, but for all them that seek learning. Shalom.